If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to yWrite. Hi, welcome to yWrite. I'm your host, Angela Grout. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of yWrite, where we learn why writers are writing. And if you're a writer, you are going to enjoy every episode that we've had because there is something for you to learn about writing. And if you're a reader, boy, do we have a lot of authors that you're going to want to look up their stories. Today, I have a local resident of Agawam, Massachusetts here, which is where I am from. And we're going to talk to him today about researching and writing. So I want to share a little bit about my guest. Like I said, he's from Agawam. His name is Larry Scherpa. And he has been gathering facts and data, stories and photographs and articles to document a sport. And we're going to talk about football today. So if you're a football fan, you're going to love this episode. He is writing about football over the span of 100 years and focused about Agawam, Massachusetts. Obviously, he's passionate about it. And we're going to call him, and I think he'll agree that he is a self-appointed an unofficial historian of Agawam High School. So today we're going to talk about where his works are at the Agawam Public Library that you can find because he has done many research projects and published stories and journals about them. But, today, let me just welcome Larry Scherpa to the show. Larry, thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, I am excited to have you here today because as you and I have been emailing each other about what you're doing, there's just this plethora of information coming into me. And I wasn't a football player, but I was a cheerleader.
Neither was I.
Okay. And I didn't graduate from Agawam High, but I am from Agawam. I went to Cathedral High School, but I know you're a 1965 graduate
Correct.
of Agawam High,
Yeah.
and a lover of Agawam and
Yes.
Agawam High.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're writing a book right now about the history of Agawam's football.
Well, technically, it's a chronology of one game, and that's the game between Agawam and West Springfield, which arouses a lot of passion among the residents of Agawam and West Springfield. It certainly has.
Every Thanksgiving.
Yes. Now, one of the things I uncovered in doing my research is that the first time a game was scheduled between Agawam and West Springfield on Thanksgiving wasn't until 1976. So prior to 1976, Agawam always played West Springfield. That was one game that was always on the schedule, going back to 1924. But the game was not played on Thanksgiving. It was usually played the second week in November. More often than not, it was the last game of the season, but not always. But in 1976, they started playing on Thanksgiving, and that added a whole new dimension to the enjoyment.
And for the audience who doesn't know the demographics and the geography of Agawam and West Springfield, they're neighboring towns.
Yes.
And, of course, like all rivalry high schools, you have that one high school that you're always having the rivalry.
Yes.
So we have Agawam, Massachusetts, and West Springfield, Massachusetts, because, the audience is all over the world. So I want, them to know the map.
Yeah. Fortunately, we're separated by a river.
The Connecticut River? No, the Westfield River.
It used to be called the Agawam River, but that's another story.
The Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, and, we have changes, that's for sure. So when did you fall in love with football?
Oh, I think
this passion that you want to know.
Way back as a young boy, I really enjoyed, I used to read about football, little novels that they used to have for boys in those days. And I enjoyed reading about football. I enjoyed playing neighborhood football.
But you never, you played neighborhood.
No, I played neighborhood football. When I got to junior high school, they had a flag football league, and I played flag football. So I always enjoyed football. What we used to do in those days, we'd go to school, come home. Now get this, we would change from our school clothes into our play clothes.
I know.
And then go out and play football.
We all had play clothes.
Yeah, that's right. And we would play football all fall in the neighborhood. There were some pretty good players in our neighborhood, many of whom went on to
pros.
Well, not into the pros, but into pretty good high school and college players. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. And I have a little when I'm writing, I had an encounter with the legendary coach Harmon Smith. I don't know if you've ever heard of Harmon Smith.
No.
Harmon Smith was first hired to coach Agawam in 1924, and he coached Agawam until 1955. And my father played football and basketball for Harmon Smith in the.
That's a long career.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, to coach high school football.
It is. In the 1930s, and we just happened to meet. This is when I was in 8th grade and I weighed 80 pounds, and I don't think I was 5 feet tall yet. And I met my father and I were shopping in the food mart, which some people might remember, and we just ran into Harmon Smith. And my father started talking to Harmon Smith, and my father said, "Yeah, my son wants to go out and play football." And Harmon Smith looked at me and said, "I don't know, he's kind of small." Well,
water boy.
That kind of did it for me. And in those days, you did not question the word of Harmon Smith.
Yeah.
You did not question the word of God. You did not question the word of Harmon Smith. And if Harmon Smith said I was too small, I was too small.
You probably still could have
so,
played.
I probably should have. Looking back on it
yes,
now.
Yes.
Of course,
So,
when I went to high school, the guys were enormous because it was in the middle of their three championships in a row.
The period that Harmon coached, 1924 to 1955.
Correct.
You've written something called the Letterman era.
Called the Leatherhead era. It was an era in football when football was football is always a rough game. But during the Leatherhead era, which started around the beginning of football, the equipment they wore was horrible. They wore leather helmets. They had no face guards. The clothing that they had provided very little protection. They did not have all of the rules regarding health and safety in the game that they have today. So it was a brutal game to the point where in the early 1900s, some college presidents were calling for the abolition of football.
Really?
And President Teddy Roosevelt had to step in, created basically what became the NCAA and said, look, we got to clean up this game or it's going to go. Yeah. And they did.
I think the writing and the research that you're doing is so important, not just because you're, the passion about Agawam, but just the history of football itself. Because, you're narrowing it in on, Agawam High and this one game every year. But it's just like the history of, how football evolved and how it evolved through Agawam High also. Because, just the uniforms and the protective gear and all of that.
Yeah, particularly in the 20s and 30s, but right at the plastic helmets didn't come in till right about the time Harmon Smith retired, right around 54, 55. And you can look at the team photos. Prior to that date, there were leather helmets. After that date, you can see the plastic helmets and face guards.
Yes, so let's talk about that because you've researched to find these photos.
Yes.
And, the passion to do any project has to be the motivating factor. So obviously you're very passionate about it, but where are you? I mean, for me, I'm thinking, okay, you can go to Agawam High School yearbooks because the yearbooks, there's one every year. There's some pictures in there. That's kind of a little bit of the simplest way to do research, but tell us a little bit about the research projects that you've taken on, how you found
things.
It's
very interesting. I consulted yearbooks from both Agawam and West Springfield. Fortunately, the Agawam Library has digitized all of the Agawam High School yearbooks, and they're available 24/7 on the Agawam Public Library website. So if I wanted to look something up at midnight in a 1954 yearbook,
I've done that.
I'm right there. West Springfield has all the yearbooks, but you have to physically go to the library, take them off the shelf, and then if you want a picture, you have to photocopy it. So the fact that the yearbooks are online in Agawam was a great help. Now, in terms of football, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and even into the 50s, yearbooks weren't very helpful at all, the Agawam yearbooks in particular. I don't know if somebody, the principal or somebody said, look, let's not overdo sports in the yearbook.
Yeah.
Because in some of the yearbooks, they would have one paragraph for the whole year for 4 sports.
They're like mugshot yearbooks.
And they didn't. There was no photographs. The first football team, the first photo of a football team, wasn't until 1940.
Oh wow!
So
it really was just the paragraph about their season.
There wasn't
listing their names.
Yeah, yes, but there wasn't a whole lot of information in either Agawam or West Springfield yearbooks through the 40s. And then that changed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. You started getting a lot more photography, a lot more writing. Particularly the 1965 yearbook was so well done by the sports editor of the yearbook.
Who was the sports editor?
I think I did that job.
Oh,
yes,
so you were the sports editor.
Yeah, I was a sports editor.
So 1965 is when the yearbook really
that's
right?
when it really
made its
But at that,
congratulations.
Yeah, but at that point, the yearbooks started providing more and more information. Simultaneously, the newspapers started providing less information. When you get to the 1970s, there's very little information about high school football, and I think part of it is because the sports writers were overwhelmed. You had the explosion of girls' sports that had to be covered. Soccer was moving to the suburbs. Even Agawam had a soccer team, and there was a legend. There was a legend in town that Harmon Smith would confiscate any soccer ball that made it over the bridge because he didn't want soccer in Agawam because that would take away from the football team.
Wow.
And there was no soccer team in Agawam until the year he retired as athletic director.
1955.
Yeah, he stayed on as athletic director for, I think it was 69 that he retired as athletic director.
Wow. Yeah. So, because I was going to ask you about doing the research and how, obviously you have the yearbooks.
Yeah.
Obviously you have your own memory, like from 1965 on, not the
earlier.
earlier.
I have my own memory of the early 60s, for like 61 to 68, 69.
And we're still in the times where from that time till now, there's people living that you can talk to get research and get the information you need. And then, of course, there's newspaper articles. And like you were saying...
that's where the bulk of the information came from, particularly in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s, was newspaper articles. I subscribe to a very powerful search engine, which allows me to research not only the news story of the day of the game, but what the newspapers did in those days, that they would have feature stories in the week leading up to the game.
About the game.
About the
team,
about
players or
the
something.
Players, about the strategy and so on. So that's what I was trying to include in the collection of articles, were all the stories that led up to the big game. And there were quite a few of them. And again, sports writers didn't have competition from TV in those days. And
what's the network, or what's that website that you?
I think it's called newspapers.com.
So you pay to be that. And
yes.
You can obviously get any kind of research. So if I was researching a murder from 1931,
I would probably help you out a bit.
Yeah. That's
because
it's a great way for.
There were side stories that would come up. For example, there was a newspaper strike in the late 1940s, and they went on strike, so there were no accounts of games.
Yeah, because sometimes when you're writing this, you still need to put in history that's happening outside of football that's still affecting football.
Yeah. So I had to do some research on this newspaper strike. How long did it last? It lasted about a year. And it's too bad because all of the kids that played football in 1946
didn't get their credits.
Their stories weren't chronicled. Some of them were in a newspaper in Holyoke. I think it was called the Holyoke Transcript Telegram. But, it just wasn't what it was prior to the strike.
What about the high school newspaper?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of information embedded in high school newspapers. The Agawam Public Library has some. I donated some from my days as sports editor to the Agawam Public Library. But there's no complete collection of the Agawam High School Mirror, which was the name of the newspaper, from its very beginnings, which was in the...
Not even at the high school? There must be some at the high school. I would think that the newspaper club, I think they call them a club. Like
one would hope so.
Yeah.
One would hope so, and that's an avenue that needs to be explored. I hope you're right.
Yeah.
I hope you're right about that. But there's a lot of information embedded in those, and it's hit or miss.
So in the email, and I should have brought some of the emails to show the pictures and stuff of how you're accumulating this, and not to diminish, you're doing scrapbooking, major scrapbooking, because you're taking, articles and photographs and, it's like how I would love to have my children's baby books organized. I mean, it's so well organized, and it's got so much information in there. And like I said, not just about Agawam, and the West Side rivalry, but about football. And I mean, it's a book that football lovers and historians will love. But how do you even go about assembling this book?
Well, that took some time. I needed to have a strategy to do this, and that evolved over time. I think if you look at what I wrote about I began it with the 1920s, and if you look at how it was done in the 1920s, it's somewhat different than, let's say, the 1950s, because the strategy evolved in the 20s, and then I would use that strategy for every other decade that I covered.
And you do it per decade.
I do it.
'Cause 100 years is a lot.
Well, I've completed the first 50 years. Mm-hmm. I hope to have the remaining 50 years done by this year's Agawam West Springfield football game.
And I feel like doing the more recent 50 years is going to be a little bit easier than the first 50 because you, like we said, we have people who are living who can tell their story. There's more access to things.
I hope so. We'll see. I have peeked ahead a little bit. I looked at the scoring records through 2012, and I noticed that in 2012 the Springfield newspapers basically stopped reporting on football.
High school sports?
High school sports. Now, prior to that, there'd always be what was I called a box score. Like in baseball, you have a box score. They had a box score for the football game. It'll tell you who scored what, who scored the extra points, what period they scored them in. Yeah. So it's 100% accurate. After 2012, you're lucky if you had a sentence, Agawam beat West Springfield.
Really?
So that's been a bit of a problem in terms of one of the things I'm trying to accomplish also is to get an accurate accounting of who scored what when for both Agawam and West Springfield.
Now, which is going to be great for the players. I'm thinking
I think so.
For
and
the players
and their families.
Yeah, and their families, exactly. Because look, this is we all want a scrapbook for our children's and their sports, but here if you're doing the 100 years, so this is an actual tangible book. But it's also tell us how you're
that's
this.
Still to be
the first
decided.
The Leatherheads.
The Leatherheads. Yeah. I have right now I have it in electronic form.
Okay.
I've done a number of other things that the Agawam Public Library has put on their website that people can gain access to. Whether they're going to choose to put this on their website or not, I don't know. I haven't talked to them yet. I hope they do.
If someone's doing it, then they're going to go into the Agawam Library, or they go on if they're worldwide, they can go to the public library online and see the different research projects that you've done.
Yes. Yeah.
And actually, let's talk about a couple of those other
projects. Very quickly.
Yeah, because there's a lot.
We've done. I did a database of all 20,000 students from Agawam High School. One is chronological, one is alphabetical.
That's amazing.
One of the most poignant ones that I did is I did Gold Star Agawam High School graduates. These are Agawam High School graduates who were killed in military service. Mm-hmm. And some of the stories are just so heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. There was one young man from Agawam who played against West Springfield in the early 30s. He joined the Army after he graduated from college. He was captured by the Japanese in the Philippines right at the beginning of the war. He was a prisoner of war of the Japanese for 4 years, and the Japanese did not treat their prisoners of war very well. Toward the end of the war, the Japanese decided that they were going to take all of their prisoners of war from wherever they were, transport them to Japan, and then use them for pawns in the invasion that everybody thought was coming. So this young man, whose name was Frank Goss, was crammed onto one of these troop transports, left the Philippines for Japan, and it was sunk by an American submarine. So can you imagine surviving 4 years as a prisoner of war?
How do you get that story? How did you find that story?
That was a separate research project that I was doing. What I did was I went to the Agawam Green out here, and they had listed names of the people who died in World War II. And then I went back and I used my own.
To see if they were graduates of the high school.
Yeah, I had to cross-reference to see if they were graduates of Agawam High School. And then I would, again, use that research, use the search engine that I have, and pull up an obituary.
Okay, so the obituary is going to give you information,
Yeah.
obviously. And then if there happened to be the news article, like how did you find out he was on that ship that the...
There was a news article, apparently, I don't know if it was right after the war, where the Japanese said, oh yeah, by the way, that ship you sunk was a troop transport and here's who was on it. That I don't know.
Okay.
But the newspaper account lists Frank Goss as one of, and there was another guy from Western Mass who was also on that ship that was sunk. But I just thought it was so tragic that you survived 4 years as a prisoner of war.
I know, and then you get sunk by your own.
And that's not the only story. Man, we could speak for hours about some of these guys. Yeah. Ned Conley, who played football for Agawam, who got killed in the Vietnam War. Dan Grover from West Springfield, who got killed in the Vietnam War.
Were you able to research like their families and talk with their families
I haven't.
Or do their families know you've written these?
I haven't taken it to that extent. And
so I'm thinking like, Frank Goss, they might want to read this story.
Yeah. Well, I hope they do. And part of what I'm trying to do with all this is to keep some memories alive, and keep some of the legends of alive. There's a lot that in this game between Agawam and West Springfield. When I first started writing it, so I was strictly taking it from the Agawam point of view.
Yeah.
And then as I got into it, I realized, West Springfield really has a story to tell as well. So I won't say it's 50-50, but I hope it's at least 60-40.
Yeah.
So that anybody from West Springfield could pick this up and learn more about the West Springfield players.
Well, and I say I'm from Agawam, but I do live in West Springfield, so
okay. Okay, all right.
We're right over the bridge.
I have a West Springfield connection as well. I was a West Springfield ski coach for 3 years, so I did wear the blue and white hat with the W and S on it for a while.
I mean, because you taught at East Longmeadow High School for many years.
Yes.
And so, I mean, research and history and teaching and gathering facts is just part of your nature.
Yes, I think so.
And so I just want to go back. There's other stories, other things besides that you have done at the public library too.
Yeah, I did a history. I called it being sent to the office, and it's about all of the principals and superintendents in the history of Agawam High School. And there's been some remarkable people who've held those positions. So that's there for anyone to see. And as soon as I get done with the football, I'm going to. I'm finishing up on the teachers of Agawam High School for the first 100 years.
Wow.
So I have a very patient and understanding.
Yeah, I don't think we have to say self-appointed historian of Agawam. Well, you are definitely
I was motivated by, I first got into this. I was motivated by a man by the name of Walter Willard, who used to write.
I know Walter Willard.
You know Walter? Walter wrote a column for the Agawam newspapers.
Yes, he did. His painter
I used to look forward to reading that every week, and that kind of revived my interest. And also a gentleman by the name of Mike Marab, who has since passed away, was another local historian. And between Walter and Mike, they knew everything there was to know.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to play catch up with them.
Well, I know Marty Balboni.
Oh, okay.
He actually writes some articles too that kind of sets you back in time in Agawam to kind of preserve a little bit of history too. So and I mean, and Walt definitely always focused on Agawam High School. Like it was always an Agawam High School kind of reunion column, and definitely Lawrence Scherpa's doing that. 100 years of research for just football, but is in one book, but doing, the history of all the Agawam teachers, doing the histories of the superintendents, doing the history of every single graduate who ever came out of Agawam High.
Well,
I mean, their names listed. I mean, I've used that website. I mean, in some of my books, even though they're fictional, they're kind of sometimes based on the reality of real people. And I've been to that site. Like,
good.
As you were saying, I'm like, I've been there. Like, I went right in and, had to Google someone's name. Boom, there they are. And then you click in and you find more information. And then it leads you down the rabbit hole. Of all sorts of different things.
Well, just one more point I would like to make as I got into this. I started reporting on the game, but I very quickly realized what was more important were the people that played in the game. Mm-hmm. And this is a small school rivalry in the western part of a small state, but some rather remarkable people have played in this game.
Yeah.
Creighton Abrams, 4-star general, played in the game. He was on the cover of Time magazine 3 times.
I always say, there's so many amazing, talented people in this area that come
Yeah.
from this area that we just don't even know about.
Well, the main Army battle tank is named after Creighton Abrams. It's the Abrams M1A tank. Now, of all the wonderful things he did in World War II in Korea and Vietnam, the most important thing he ever did, he had an interception and recovered a fumble in the 1931 football game. I mean, what else? It was all downhill after that.
As a fictional writer, I have to say this research is phenomenal because, so when I wrote April Rain, I was trying to do a time setting, so I started talking about the Stanley Cup hockey game.
Oh, okay.
Because it's kind of that time period, and I really do talk about what really was happening during that time, like bringing up, a player named Corvo and doing that research to find the real story. Like, how cool, you're inspiring me, if I was to write a story and wanted to say, to talk about this major general and then be like, oh yeah, that was the year he scored, this major touchdown. Just that little tiny truthful fact in a story just brings it together. So, I mean, what you're doing can help writers too.
Yeah. Corvo, I think I remember that name, Montreal.
Yes, Montreal. Yes.
I did play hockey for 3. I didn't play football, but I did play hockey.
Okay, I'm a hockey, I don't know, hockey kid, I guess, Army brat, hockey brat, I don't know, my father, brothers.
For such a small school rivalry, we've had a 4-star general, Creighton Abrams. We had a Heisman Trophy winner in Angelo Bertelli.
Yeah, I do know that.
Now, Bertelli played for Cathedral.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that's
what most people don't know, even people from West Springfield, he played, his freshman year, he played for West Springfield in the game. And we also have a gold medalist. Gene Grazia from West Springfield was on the 1960 Olympic team. So those, I mean...
We need an Agawam Hall of Fame.
So, yes. And again, for such a small school rivalry to have some of these tremendous people come out of it. And one of the best football players ever for either team in Western Mass is a guy named Jim Bruno. And Jim Bruno was the superintendent of schools in Agawam for 10 or 12 years. So, I mean, I could go on and on talking about these folks that played in the game and then went on to do remarkable things in their life.
So, I want to ask how people can get a hold of you, but more importantly, how writers could get a hold of you if they need a specific fact for their book. Oh, Larry, I got a question for you. In 1948, can you give me the name of a football player and tell me something he did so
Actually,
I can incorporate it?
I could do that, but I won't.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. So we know that there's things at Agawam Public Library that they can go and get, but this particular football player is
what I have to do is I have this electronically now.
Yep.
I got to put some ribbons and bows on it, tie it up, and get it ready for publication, so to speak. We'll see if the Agawam Library wants to put it online. If they do, great. And if they don't, I will print up some hard copies, and I'm going to make a donation to the West Springfield Library. And the folks over there, particularly a guy by the name of Joe Scalia, have been very, very helpful. So they're going to get a hard copy. I'm going to give Agawam a hard copy. Probably give the Agawam Historical Association a hard copy. The West Springfield Historical Association a hard copy. And then both schools will get a hard copy.
Will you put it on Amazon or something? Because I feel like there's all these people who've played football over the years. They might be interested.
I don't know what kind of a market there would be for
There's
those.
A market for it.
And I don't know how much it would cost to do all of this. But I'm not in it.
Well, I have a couple other episodes you can watch, and a couple upcoming ones about publishers talking about how to publish, whether traditional vanity or self-publishing.
This would be self-published, and if we could cover the cost of
and doing what you're doing in that kind of scrapbooky form, that's a little more intense than just doing a prose. Because you have pictures.
And the other thing is the number of pages has gotten ridiculous.
What are we up to?
Well, there's at least 100 pages for each decade.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, probably the easiest way to get in touch with me would be just to send me an email.
Okay.
And it's real easy. It's lscherpa@comcast.net. Don't forget the C in Sherpa.
Yeah.
We had to pay extra for that.
Yes, I know, and I kind of forgot the C at one time. So lscherpa.
We had to pay extra for that.
Well, my family I think dropped the C because I was Angela Schumann. So people are they always think it's SCHUMAN.
Yeah.
I go no. I go it's human with an S.
Okay.
And then I'm like, but maybe there was a C once, but I think we gave it away. So maybe we gave it. to you.
We got that.
You're the recipient of my C.
Yes. Okay.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And
this has been really great and educational, and I want to thank my audience for tuning in every week to listen to what writers are doing. And, today I got to meet someone and have them on the show who I've been accessing his files and didn't even know it. So, it's really, just a wonderful thing. Studio 954 has been so generous of letting me have this podcast here. We are approaching episode 100 soon, so I just want to let you know that stay tuned, because episode 100 is going to be a little bit different than what we do every day. So, make sure you're hitting subscribe so that you can get all the information on the YouTube links and all of the other streaming channels. And subscribe, also to the Facebook page so you can maybe be a part of that 100th episode. So again, this is the time of the show where I'm going to give you a little bit of a writing prompt. So set your alarm for, 10 minutes. And today we've been talking with Larry Scherpa about doing research and remembering people, and finding out, who they are, what they've done. And if you're a writer and you're writing a book, whether it's fictional or memoir, you need to do research. So what I want you to do is think about, what your story is, what you're writing about. I mean, maybe you're going to make a list of people or your characters and, start to figure out some of their traits. And you might find out that when you go online and you type in somebody's name, if you're doing a memoir, you're going to find research places that, whether it's give the obituary or a news article or their yearbook and get some information about them. And if you're writing fiction, well, guess what? You can go to those sites and you can start pulling some information from some of those people and create your own character with it. So, today's project is a little bit different. It's just, make your list of what you want to research and start researching it. Get the facts for your characters, get the facts for, the people that you're including in your memoir, and really make sure that it's polished. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to yWrite, and I will see you next time. Bye.